Many women struggle with shame when it comes to their desires, when it comes to intimacy.
Fully giving of ourselves is actually allowing them into our world, into our brain, into our fears, into our desires, into those places where we don't necessarily feel safe enough to say it out loud to other people. So first, understand your body. Understand then what brings you pleasure. So that's not just sexual pleasure.
I'm in touch with how I feel, and then I'm willing to communicate that because that's going to be the foundation for a physical relationship that is satisfying to both people.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Marriage Magnet podcast, where it's not just about attracting the one, it's about becoming the one. I'm your host, Nechama Phillips, and here we focus on growth, high standards, and creating an intentional life and love through self-development. Navigate your dating journey with clarity and confidence, because marriage is not just a box you check off. It's your life. Welcome, Agalia, to the Marriage Magnet podcast. I'm so excited to have you on today. And I know we're going to have an incredible conversation that's going to be so helpful to so many people, single, married, everyone in between. So just, I guess, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, why you're passionate about what you do, etc.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. My name's Galya Falkson. I'm a sex and relationship coach, and my work is all about helping people navigate intimacy with confidence and breaking free from shame and build deeply fulfilling relationships. I think what makes my work unique is that I bring my own perspective into how I see the gaps between cultural and religious values and the modern values, and just also bring in the evidence-based relationship coaching and the training that I've had to basically just like help bridge that gap between growing up in a religious world where these things are not spoken about and actually just normalize what is normal and help bring just a healthier, more connected space for people and their relationships, and to hopefully make these conversations more open and relatable and maybe sometimes even a little bit fun.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Amazing. I absolutely love you and what you do, really. I just think it's like, even that last post, I think one of your recent posts about like modesty and how that plays into like, you know, physical intimacy in marriage. And like, there's so much that you unpack that I think is so important that sometimes we may not even realize is in our subconscious like wiring, and that's why we're having certain issues, or we're having a hard time with things, or like you're saying, not having as much fun as we could be having and enjoying things that we should be enjoying. So it's, and you also bring, like you're saying, that evidence base, like that really like the hard facts, the education. So I think it's an amazing blend, and I'm just so excited. I have a whole list of a bunch of questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but I'm just gonna I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna start, and yes, just give us your perspective. I want to hear everything that you think about these things. Okay, so first thing I wanted to ask you was many women struggle with shame. And I know that's a big thing. I've seen you talk about it a lot when it comes to their desires, when it comes to intimacy. And I guess what's your biggest tip on breaking free from those feelings? Like, I guess when you're dating and looking for someone you're attracted to, when people say you don't really need to be attracted, it just has to, you know, work on paper kind of thing. Or within a marriage where it's like, you know, you shouldn't be prioritizing your pleasure, or it's not important to work on that. I guess give us your thoughts on the shame that contributes to these things.
Oh, it's such a big topic, and I feel like we could do an entire podcast on it itself. So I'm going to give you a short answer. But
I know. Each thing in short.
Yeah, so I'm just prefacing that whatever I answer tonight, there's almost definitely tons more to say around it. But shame around intimacy is often something that's learned. We don't get shame naturally. Shame is something that is taught to us. So I always say that like often we're carrying shame that's not even ours. And I think that's a really important thing. Once you realize that shame is often not even your shame, it's not an inherent truth to you, it's a perspective that's been passed down from someone else, recognizing what your beliefs actually are. And that comes from self-education, reading books, listening to experts, and understanding what healthy intimacy looks like. Then you can start to break free from those shameful messaging that you've now almost taken upon yourself, and you can hold compassion for yourself without judgment, and you can become curious, and You can have safe conversations with people that you trust and people that are educated and understand both sides of the world, you know, and just help you heal from the shame that you've now almost like I said, like taken on. It's not necessarily yours to keep.
Yeah, I like that perspective because it also, when you're even saying like healing from that shame, it's not as dramatic as a healing process as sometimes we may think when we start to just release that this is not ours, right? Like this is just not, this has never been what I think or feel about things. This has just been told to me that I should feel ashamed of this. And then when we realize that that's not really, you know, in line with what we feel, with what we believe, with the way we want to live, it's easier to drop it. And I think it takes less healing than we might think when we're stuck in it.
Absolutely. I think the healing comes from the continuous education and compassion and those conversations that you continuously have, because that breaks down that shame, as you know, in small pieces as you go along.
It's like kind of understanding how it got piled on and then just like taking it off layer by layer. You know, so it's just not your burden anymore.
Exactly.
Amazing. I love that. Okay, so for single women specifically, why would you say it's important for them to be in touch with their own desires, in touch with their own like emotions in the dating process, even before entering a relationship?
It's a great question. I think that a lot of the time when we're not in touch with our own desires and emotions, we often do things not from a place of self-awareness. So we do it maybe to seek external validation, or we're doing it with the wrong reasoning. And I think the most important thing is when we understand our own desires and our own emotions, we have a self-awareness that's like part of us. So when we get into a space where there's conflict, or we're feeling lost in the relationship, or our partner we have expectations of our partner that we don't really know how to manage, we can have a self-awareness of like, well, actually, what are my needs and what are the boundaries that I have? And we also avoid relationships that don't align with our values of fulfillment and our meaning. So when we actually come from a place of understanding our desires, our emotions, and all of that, all those things that make us who we are, then the partner that we choose and the way we communicate with that partner and the way we communicate our own needs and how we communicate to ourselves, you know, are we being very judgy of ourselves, or are we being harsh on ourselves? All of that is held by the fact that we're in touch with ourselves, and then we have that self-awareness.
Yeah. That leads to making such a much better decision. And then, like you're saying, also within the relationship, navigating it in a way that's going to work for both of you. And that's why, like, literally everything you're saying, I'm like, that's what I do in my Marriage Magnet Method program for single women, because I really think it's about building the self-awareness, the self-acceptance, the self-worth, the connection with yourself and your own desires, your own needs, being able to communicate that, and making sure that you choose the right person. And then also when you enter the relationship, know how to navigate it in a way that's healthy and happy, and is going to serve both of you. So really, it sounds like you're saying being in touch with your own desires, being in touch with your needs and who you are before getting married is like a high priority.
Yeah. And if it's not something you've done before you got married, then like to make it a priority, to have that self-awareness, because self-awareness is literally what is going to drive every reaction, every conversation, everything that you do. So when you're in a fight with your partner and you can say, you know what, I'm triggered right now. And this isn't on you that I'm triggered, but I'm triggered. And therefore, I need to manage why I'm feeling triggered, what's going on for me. And then I can communicate, okay, well, actually what I need from you is not to buy me flowers. It's actually what I'm upset about is that you didn't, hold my hand while I was feeling triggered. And, you know what your needs are because you're aware of yourself. And this is a lifelong journey. So I don't think that every single person can say, oh, well, because I'm not fully self-aware yet, I can't get married. No, as a married person, I'm not fully self-aware.
Constantly learning, constantly evolving, constantly growing. That is life for sure.
But it's just that awareness of, okay, I am constantly growing. That is that self-awareness that you continuously build on.
Exactly. Yeah. And before getting married, obviously you can, if that wasn't the case and now is now, we always start from now,
Exactly.
right? It's never too late. But before marriage, and if you are in the dating process and you're the kind of person who wants to be in touch with yourself, who wants to have a happy, healthy marriage, who doesn't just want to get like thrown into something because of pressure, because of fear, all of that, like, now is the time. Of course, it's going to take time. Like, of course, you're going to continuously be growing, but there's a certain kind of like base level of just getting to the place where you're like, I know I did some foundational prep to know that I'm setting myself up for success. And it's so much easier to grow within a marriage, at least from personal experience. It's so much easier to grow within the marriage and to keep building on that self-awareness when you're in it, if you've already done something before. Because sometimes when you're in the moment and you are triggered, like you just mentioned, like it's very hard to like just take a moment and get back to yourself. And if you don't have experience doing that, I think it's just extra hard. Still doable, but extra hard. So I believe it's super important to do beforehand as much as possible. But yes, not let that hold us back and be like, oh, I can't get married because I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
100%. I think a healthy
Amazing.
relationship is built with two whole individuals choosing to grow together and not me losing myself or someone else completing me. I hate those terms like, oh, you complete me.
Oh my gosh, for sure. It's the connection. It's about how can we connect in a way that we, is good for both of us, that we both appreciate ourselves and each other, but not one in place of the other.
Exactly.
For sure. Okay, how can someone prepare to communicate their needs and boundaries in an intimate relationship specifically? I guess talking about physical intimacy. Well, I guess really my question starts with, I guess, the emotional vulnerability and then how that plays into being able to have conversations around physical intimacy and just like how to navigate that. What can someone who's single do now? And then also once someone is married, like, I guess it's hard to be vulnerable. People struggle with that a lot. So what's your perspective on like bringing that into the dating process and then bringing that into a marriage to foster a healthy, happy connection in all ways?
I think that's an incredibly important question. I think I want to break it into two parts. So the first part is like, how do you prepare to communicate about your needs and boundaries in a relationship that's intimate, and understanding that vulnerability plays a role in that is that emotional vulnerability plays a role. So to start with the emotional vulnerability, we have to understand that if we are able to fully give of ourselves to the person that we're with, giving of ourselves does not mean we cook them dinner and we set the table and we clean their home. No, but fully giving of ourselves is actually allowing them into our world, into our brain, into our fears, into our desires, into our shame, into those places where we don't necessarily feel safe enough to say it out loud to other people. That's a space where they can truly get to know you, not just from I know this person because, in the movies where they're like, oh, I love you so much because every time you smile, that dimple on your cheek just, and you're like, oh, he notices such beautiful things about her, but really in reality, he's only noticing very physical elements of her, and there's actually no depth to that relationship. And
and even if it's not a physical attribute, a lot of times it's very surface level things that they're not pointing out, and so that's not really knowing you.
And I feel like what truly knowing someone is being able to share emotional vulnerability and give over who you are, so that when you're with them on a physical level, that vulnerability has already created that safety with this person, and you already feel like you can open yourself and allow yourself to receive from this person because you feel safe with them. And the way they respond to you being emotional is obviously a key sign in if this person is right for you or not, and that's something you'd look for when you're dating. But when it comes to preparing to communicate about those needs, it kind of goes back to what we said earlier. It's like that self-awareness, reflecting on like what actually makes you feel loved. I always ask these questions. What makes you feel loved? What makes you feel safe? What makes you feel uncomfortable? Those are a great place to start. Obviously, then, in a coaching session, we would go deeper into all of that and more questions. But that's a really great place to start, to kind of say, okay, well, what do I need? And once I know what I need, then if I feel safe with someone, if I have that vulnerability and that space where they make me feel seen and heard and validated, then it's going to be easier for me to say, okay, well, this person makes me feel comfortable. This person makes me feel safe. I want to share with them. But if I know this person makes me feel uncomfortable, this person doesn't hear what I have to say, doesn't make me feel seen, well, then it's not going to be easy for me to share with them. And it's not going to be something that's going to make me feel loved. So it's about, like you said, kind of putting in those boundaries as to like, okay, this is where you're not showing up for me. This is how you are showing up for me. And then giving the person the opportunity to do that for you. And I would say, do this while you're dating to see if this person can be emotionally available to you. Share your vulnerabilities, express yourself in a way that might feel a little bit out of your comfort zone. You don't have to share your deepest fantasy or desire that you've never told anyone. You can just share a vulnerability that is something you would share with other people, but want to see how this person's going to respond to you. And if they should respond in a way that makes you feel safe, that physical intimacy that you then will build on comes more naturally when you're feeling safe with this person. Comes more easily.
Exactly. It starts, especially in the dating phase, if you are not engaging in any physical relationship, it's so important to do that with emotional vulnerability as much as possible to see. That is the kind of the test, right? To see like if you're compatible, if you see each other, if you understand each other, if you can hold space for each other and connect in a genuine way. And I actually find that sometimes with the single women that I'm working with, like it's the ability to be vulnerable with yourself first, even though it sounds funny because it's like you, but to be vulnerable with yourself, to even admit these things to yourself. Because a lot of times, people are like, well, no, I'm pretty confident. I'm doing okay. I'm doing this. Like, I don't really need that. I don't, and it's putting on a little bit of a tough exterior, not even just to other people, but to themselves, where they don't feel the ability to face themselves truly in that way, where they can be vulnerable to themselves and admit to themselves that they struggle with certain things or that they want certain things because maybe they've been squashing their desires in some way. So it really starts with the self, because if you're not going to be able to be vulnerable with yourself, what are you going to communicate? Like, there's almost like, what am I going to communicate if I don't actually know what I'm supposed to communicate? And being able to put those boundaries and, knowing what your needs are, it really starts with facing yourself and being able to be vulnerable with yourself. So I'm wondering, is there any, I know these are all such deep topics, but is there any perspective that you have that can help people that are just like, what's my first step? What do I do if I'm wanting to like be a little bit more vulnerable with myself first? Where do I begin?
So I think that's probably a question every single person would ask themselves at some point in a different way, maybe not with the same words, but we all want to understand ourselves to not to the same degree. Every person's different, but there's a part of us that wants to just know, what's my purpose? What I remember as like a young kid questioning, like, what's the point of, like, why am I in this world? Like, what is the purpose? I remember the question, people saying like, you've got a tough kid in this world. And I was like, but what is this tough kid that I have? And so we all have this desire to understand what we're here to do, or, a little bit about ourselves. And the answer that always resonated for me when I asked those questions was, well, what's unique to you that no one else has? And oftentimes we create this ideal version of ourselves based on what everyone else has. So do I have the lips like that celebrity? And do I have the eyes like that? And does my hips look like this person? And does my clothes look like that influencer? And does my husband have, and we define ourselves by what everyone else has, instead of looking at what is unique to me and how can I define myself based on my unique elements. And it's got nothing to do with how I look or how I dress or how I'm trying to define myself outwardly, but actually who I am internally. And that's a really beautiful, loving space that you can go into, because you can basically meet who you are and meet that little girl who really loved to do certain things, and you realize, oh, she still loves to do that as an adult, and she's still quirky, and she's still funny, and she still does all these strange things that she used to be so self-conscious of, but actually that's what makes her this unique, awesome person.
Now she's willing to own it
Exactly.
more. Hopefully.
100%. But I think like
Yeah.
it's really just about like owning your uniqueness, owning what makes you stand out from everyone else, because you do have a different story and you absolutely are not the same as anyone else. There's not a single person that's exactly the same as you. So the first step to becoming vulnerable is actually just reflecting on like, who am I and what can I give to this world? And that in itself is the most vulnerable space, you know, being able to admit like, oh, this is what I'm good at and this is where I'm not great at, and this is where I can improve. And that in itself is already vulnerability. And I think like Judaism actually pushes that so much and we don't even realize it. We don't realize that a lot of us are actually already vulnerable with ourselves, but we're not conscious of how we're doing that. So we assume that we can't do it. But we absolutely can. And so, the first step is like noticing your unique abilities and then just holding space for your insecurities. Because when you realize that your insecurities aren't flaws, they just what make you human, that's when you can really step into, oh, it's okay to be vulnerable because I'm human.
Yeah. And I like that a lot. It's very practical. And it sounds like for someone who is like, where do I begin with who am I? Right. It's such a huge existential question. It sounds like what you mentioned was going back, like reflecting on your childhood, reflecting on like, just you as a kid, as a teenager, like what excited you, what made you tick, like what motivated you, what did you connect with, and maybe what have you told yourself along the way is not like good, not okay, not relevant to making money, not right. Like there's a lot of parts of us that were just like, that's not applicable anymore in my adult life. So it sounds like just reflecting on that like inner child or even teenager part of you that, and asking like, what was she excited about? What did she feel her purpose was? And because sometimes as an adult, we may have lost a little bit of that. So that could be a good place to start.
And also, even if you want to take that a little step further and think about like, what did you feel insecure about as a kid? That's where it started for me. I was like, what was I insecure about? I was insecure about the fact that I was impulsive. And I would do things out of impulsivity. But the problem is I would get me in trouble with friends and people would tease me or whatever it is because I would just say or not really think about what I was doing.
No filter.
Before I did it. And that's one of my greatest strengths today as an adult, and not realizing what a strength that is. Like yes, you have to be careful with impulsivity. It can go to an extreme. But if you use it right, impulsivity can be an amazing strength to have. And in decision making and in deciding what's good for you and making it, just knowing in this moment what's good for me. Like what do I want to eat? Whatever. Okay, we're getting a little sidetracked. But I would just say like bring it back to like what you can start with there. Like what did I feel uncomfortable about? Okay, how can I use that as a person today, because I still have that within me, and see the strength in it. And that these are all just the most vulnerable things you can do, getting to know yourself and taking, I guess, accountability for you.
Exactly. Facing yourself and taking personal responsibility for the person that you are today, and how that's gonna, like how you're gonna let that drive the rest of your decisions and the rest of your life, for sure. I love everything you're saying. Really, we could talk for hours. Okay, I think this is a good one, and I think you would have a lot to say on this one. What are some ways that women can prepare themselves mentally and emotionally, educating themselves besides for going on your page and maybe working with you, but educating themselves for the intimate aspects of marriage while staying true to their values now? Like we talked about earlier, maybe women that are watching this podcast are not getting into physical relationships before marriage. Maybe some are, maybe some have been in the past, but now aren't, right? There's obviously a lot of variation, but with staying true to your values, how do you also prepare yourself and educate yourself on the physical aspects of marriage right now while you're single and while you're dating?
I love that question. So I think you'd break it up into also like the elements of it. First is understanding biologically. How are you made up? What is happening in your body? What happens with your hormones monthly? Understanding your cycles, understanding how that affects your mood. All of those things are key in having a healthy relationship, because how your body works is literally the most important thing. If you can understand how your body works, not that anyone, even scientists today, don't understand how the female body works, but just understand yourself. What happens when you're in the follicular phase of your menstrual cycle? What happens when you're in the ovulatory phase? How do you feel? All the different elements. So there's resources online, and there's lots of different reliable spaces that you can go and learn from a biological perspective, just how your anatomy is. Then you can take that one step.
And it's so much more out there these days. No, like it's so much more. People talk about it so much more than they used to 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like when I was dating, nothing obviously besides for you, but like I don't think I've seen. On the other side, I've seen it just radically grow in that way, where people are talking about cycles and getting to know yourself in these ways, which has not been, I think, the norm. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Continue.
Not at all. And I think it's great. But it's a very valid point that you bring up. But with that point, you need to know who to get your information from, because there's a million websites out there that are going to give really bad advice, and TikToks are going to give really bad advice when it comes to these things. So just to make sure you're getting your information from reliable spaces. But yeah, so first understand your body. Understand then what brings you pleasure. So that's not just sexual pleasure. That's when I eat an ice cream, can I actually enjoy the ice cream? Or am I thinking about the calories and worrying about what this is doing to my body and thinking about all these other things? And instead of being like, I'm in this moment, I'm enjoying this ice cream, and it is pleasurable for me to experience this delicious ice cream. I'm sitting in the sun and I'm feeling the rays on my face. Can I just sit there and enjoy those rays on my face? Can I be open to pleasurable experiences? Am I able to be present in pleasurable experiences?
Yeah, as you're speaking, I'm like, it sounds like the gateway to pleasure is presence from everything you're mentioning.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest gateways to just experiencing physical intimacy in the most profound way, when you're able to be present. And that's not just physically present, that's mentally present, that's emotionally present. That's why the Torah speaks about like not being with your partner when you're drunk or when you're in certain moods, because in the end of the day, when you're in a space that's open to the intimacy that you can create and the connection that you can build, that is going to look so different to someone who's just doing that because it has to be done, or they're just there because someone told them this is what happens, or they're trying it but it's not pleasurable and they don't know what they're doing wrong. That comes back to understanding the body and being able to say, okay, well, I understand my body. So when my husband touches me, I can tell him, I really don't like it when you touch me like this, because I don't like, I don't like being touched on my side, but I love it when you gently stroke my thigh, or when you kiss my neck, because that feels nice for me. I can associate with a pleasurable experience, something I want more of, as opposed to, I don't know if I want it. So yeah, it goes back to just understanding your body, what allows you to be present, what allows you to be calm, what allows you to feel safe. All of those things are going to play a beautiful role in preparing you mentally and emotionally for the physical elements of your relationship. And then the biggest one is learning to just communicate your desires. So like, even if that means you go back to the barista and say, sorry, I really wanted foam and not whipped cream, that already is communicating a desire that they didn't hear. So even practicing just like on different things, like when you're in a store or when you're in the grocery aisle, like the shopping aisle, whatever it is, when someone does something that bothers you, you don't people please, but you actually communicate your desire, or you communicate respectfully to those people. Those are great ways to prepare yourself when you're now in the bedroom and your husband is, trying to pleasure you, but he's doing it in the wrong way. You can say, sorry, babes, actually, can you move to the left? Can you go to the right? Can you help me like this? Can you do it like this? Yeah. Because I can say what I want.
If you don't have the ability to do that in other ways, then it's going to be really hard to do that in a physical relationship. So even if you don't have experience yet with intimacy in that way, with physical intimacy, when you're single, when you're dating, it's even on a date, like communicating, I'm cold, like the air is blowing on me, can we move to a different table? Or small things that honor how you feel, that you're just practicing and leaning into, like, I'm in touch with how I feel, and then I'm willing to communicate that, because that's going to be the foundation for a physical relationship that is satisfying to both people.
Absolutely. I love that. Like being able to just express yourself and knowing your body and understanding, you know, different parts of the month. You're not going to be in a headspace for certain things, and knowing that about yourself so that you don't now put unrealistic expectations on yourself at that time of the month to show up in a way that's not realistic for who you are. And being able to tell your partner about that. It's just a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. We'll choose one more question. Okay. What are some common blocks or fears that women have around intimacy, and how can they begin to overcome them even in the dating phase? And I know all of these are like big, and then they're also very interconnected with everything, but just give us some thoughts on common blocks and fears that people have, you know, on intimacy and how to approach that when they're like, I'm dating, I want to get married, I've never had a physical relationship before, I'm kind of scared, but I'm kind of excited, but I don't really know what to think or feel. Yeah, give us your thoughts.
I think that one of the biggest blocks, at least people, I don't want to say only religious because this happens in every community, but I think one of the biggest blocks we have is that we don't know what it's going to be like. So we're afraid of what it could be. And there's often people who are like, oh, it's so painful the first time. Or, you know, you have to do this or that. And then this is what happens during birth. And they give us all these like fears that we then take on.
The horror stories.
Yeah. And you're afraid of what's to come instead of just being able to be like, oh, I know my body. I know what's okay and I know what's not okay. And I can help this person that I'm marrying to know me too. So I think there's like a fear of like what is to come, but there's also the fear that's coming from like lack of education or not knowing just how to deal with your anxiety. So you're anxious around this topic, but you're not actually addressing, okay, well, where's my anxiety coming from and why am I anxious about this and how can I alleviate my anxiety? So yeah, that would be one of the most common ones. Another one is like often people will say to me, because they've never done anything, how do I know if I'm going to be any good? Or he's had previous experiences before and like, I don't know if it's, you know, I'm so uncomfortable, I don't know what to do. Or I do know what to do and he doesn't know what to do. Or what happens if, this is a common one, like a girl who's had other experiences and then like now is, dates her husband-to-be and then they decide to be sure in a year. And she's in a space where she's like, I know what it feels like, but what happens if he's not good? Or what happens if, you know, there's that fear of inadequacy from multiple different places.
It's a lot of comparison on all ends and judgment.
Yeah, or they even comparing to like movies or things that they've seen. So the number one tip I'll just give there is that like no one expects perfection and perfection looks different for everyone. And to go in worrying that you're not going to be good enough. Imagine me saying like, I'm going to a dance class and I'm not going to be good enough and I've never danced in my life before. Obviously, I'm not going to be good enough. I know I'm not going to do well in that first dance class. But
you're setting yourself up for failure.
But you're going to the class to learn. You're not going there to be the professional dancer teaching the class. Like, and if we go in with that perspective, like we're just in this together to learn and to grow together and to and educate ourselves where we need to educate ourselves. And if we're not perfect, it's okay because there's solutions to the things that are problematic, and then there's solutions to the very unrealistic expectations. So yeah, I would start with those as like the common ones that I see at least.
Yeah, it sounds like the themes of this is like self-awareness, education, and what I heard a little bit throughout weaving in what you were saying was like self-trust. Because if you can trust yourself, like we can figure this out, I can figure this out, I don't need to be perfect, I know my body, and so I know that I don't need to listen to those horror stories because I'll be okay, I'll navigate things as they come up, I trust myself to communicate, I trust myself to, listen to my own feelings and to express them. Like, if you trust yourself, if you have some education, and if you're self-aware, you are setting yourself up for success. And there's a lot of those fears and blocks might not feel so relevant. And even the ones that do, like just the normal ones, like you're saying, the anxiety, it's just like, okay, that's a part of being human, of just like, I have anxiety because this is something I've never done before, or maybe I haven't done it in a while, or maybe, all the reasons me and him, like whatever considerations we have to consider that make me feel a little bit nervous. But that's just a part of being human. And I'm okay with that. Like, so I'll be a little nervous. I'll be a little anxious. Like, it's not the end of the world. I don't have to make that mean anything negative.
100%. I love that. And I love what you said so much about just being like trusting yourself, because overthinking and like anxiety, we're not diagnosing anything here, but what we're saying that often comes from the fact that we don't trust ourselves. And oftentimes we're overanalyzing or overthinking because we just don't trust, okay, what is my gut telling me? I don't need to overthink this. This doesn't feel right to me. And it's probably the most empowering thing I ever learned. And I only learned this in my 30s, so I'm glad that I finally learned it. But one of the most empowering things I ever learned was like, it's okay to separate your emotions from someone else's emotions and not take on what they're feeling to dictate how you behave. It's it sounds so simple.
If you're empathetic and compassionate, it takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of practice. It's not easy
at all. And it was one of the most profound lessons I ever learned. And it literally changed my life when I was able to say, okay, this is something that's upsetting them. It's not actually upsetting me. So I'm not going to take this personally, but I'm going to hold space for them. But I'm not taking it personally. It's not an attack on me. And I'm going to do what's right for me because I know and I trust myself. It was, and without being selfish, like you often equate, oh no, that person's just thinking about themselves with selfishness. And you can realize it's actually the most beautiful, profound balance and harmony with the two. It's just about finding,
sometimes what we think is selfish is really allowing a real connection, because the opposite is just it's like obsession with self or obsession with the other person's reaction of you. And so when we think like it's selfish, it's like, is it? Maybe let's look at this a little further and see if that actually is what selfish is, because sometimes we're just wired to think like, don't think about yourself. And then we're realizing that we're thinking about ourselves more by doing that, basically.
100%. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Amazing. Okay, so I could talk to you forever, but we're going to end here. I want you to tell everyone like where they can find you, what you do. Fill us in for anyone who may be looking for what you offer.
Awesome. I have a website. It's myname.com. www, in the beginning. And there I have all my resources and a little bit about me, contact space as well to contact me. I also have an Instagram page at Galya Falkson, which, I just speak about all of the things that we spoke about today.
Well, she has amazing courses and you have like a thing for kids, right? Where it's like how to teach your kids about intimacy and their bodies, and just amazing, amazing resources. Definitely check out her website, her Instagram, everything. Reach out for her for coaching if you need on this topic. And thank you so much for joining. And for everyone listening, I just want to let you know that the Marriage Magnet Method program is enrolling right now. So if this is something that you might want to consider, definitely look at the description or the show notes below for the links on everything, on all the information. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye.